Morning card making friends, welcome back. It's Sandi here. As promised, I am back with the Spring Gnomes from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to do a video showing you how I colored them and created my cards. I'm starting with Neenah 80-pound cardstock because it's Copic friendly, and I'm going to be stamping my gnomes with the Gina K amalgam ink. And this ink is not only Copic friendly, but it's also waterproof, so you can use it for your watercoloring as well. I did stamp it a couple of times just to get a nice dark impression. And I'm cleaning it off with my picket fence scrubber. Love this new thing. If you haven't bought one yet, I highly recommend it. It really does a great job of cleaning up your stamps. Okay, so when I stamp smaller images, I use a half a sheet of the Neenah, and then I cut out what I need, and I write on it what I have, so that when I throw it in my scrap bin, I know what type of paper it is. And for coloring, I color on top of a piece of Neenah cardstock as well. I just think that it adds some stability for me and helps keep my coloring nice and smooth. So I'm going to be starting with the noses, and we're going to be using these three colors: E13, E51, and R32. I'm starting with the 13, and I'm doing a line down the right side of the nose, coming back in with the E51, and I'm sorry I'm so far out. I do eventually figure out that I forgot to zoom in. So I've also done the strip of pink, and now I'm coming back in with the light color, and I'm going to blend those together. And you're going to see as we work along here that I do 2 layers of coloring, because you got to get the ink down into the paper. So this is just kind of sitting on the surface with the first layer, and you'll notice when you start playing with Copics that it doesn't blend very well on the first go round. And so I go right back over, starting right at the very beginning with that darker brown, putting that strip down the right hand side, and then coming back over that and extending it out a little bit with the pink, and then coming back in again and blending with the lighter color. I always blend with my lighter colors. And see, I'm back in here, and I'm going right over top of the darker colors, moving it all around, and you'll see the second time around is much better at the blending. So we're moving on to the blues, and we've got BG 18, 13, and 11. And again, I'm starting with the darkest, and I'm going around the outside edge of all of them and through the leaves and everything on the hat. I'm going to be coloring both of these gnomes at the same time, and then at the very end I'll put the cards together at the same time. So, and I've had a lot of customers ask me not to speed up the coloring because they want to see how slow I color and how long it takes me to blend, and I understand that. And so sorry if you like the sped up videos. We're going to do slow and easy this time. Okay, so I'm coming in with my second color, which is the 13. And you go back over the dark, but then you pull it out again a little bit more towards the center. And I'm not worrying about where the light source is coming from. They did teach us that at Copic classes when I first took my lessons, but you can also do kind of highlighting from straight on, which is what I'm doing with these guys. Then you don't need to worry about shadows. So I'm coming in. I'm also trying to stay just a little bit inside the lines, because when you start adding 2 layers of colors in all of these, it does kind of flow out a tiny little bit and will go outside the lines if you draw and color right up to the lines. So just kind of keep that in mind. And here I go. I finally remember that I need to zoom in for you. So sorry that took so long. There was lots going on yesterday and my brain was just not where it should be. So this is my third color, and I'm using it to blend all over and working my way around all of the leaves and trying to pull as much as that color in as possible. But you'll see that the color doesn't really move that much. And again, because this is the first layer. So I'm just going to fill it in. I also think that this 11 needs to be re-inked. So I need to fill that baby back up again. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to go back to my darkest color, which is the 18. And I'm going to go around and do all my outlines. And I go carefully when I'm going around little things, trying to keep the ink out of the other ones. I want my leaves to be a nice light green, so I don't want any of that blue in there. And I also don't want the blue running into my nose either. So again, carefully going around the outside, also shadowing in some of the leaves. And then coming back with the middle one, which is the BG13, going over the dark and then pulling out a little bit more to the center with the middle shading. And sorry, my camera also goes in and out of focus because it's on autofocus, and sometimes it picks up my hand instead of the coloring. As soon as I get one of these colored, I'll set it up in the left-hand corner so that my camera's got something to look at, and that should stop all the refocusing. So see, I'm going a little bit wider with that medium blue, and then I'm coming back in with my 11, and I'm pulling that all back into the center again, and that helps blend it. It also helps to darken the center just a tiny bit. It's still highlighted, but it's a little bit, the color's a little bit deeper, I guess, for lack of better description. And I work it quite a bit. Again, this is light, so I'm trying to pull that other color that's sitting in there into the dark. And if you want to see if you have enough ink, flip your paper over. If you can see the ink on the other side, then it is blended all the way through, and you should be able to start moving these colors a little bit more easy. Or a little bit easier. That was bad English. So I hope you're having a lot of fun getting some coloring in. We're finding that with everything that's going on, trying to ignore it. I turned the TV off. I don't want to listen to the news anymore. So I've got Sirius Radio on my computer in my stamping room. I cranked that up and I have been coloring. So I'm going to try and share more videos with you over the next little while because I know we're all kind of stuck at home and we're wondering what to do. So hopefully I can come up with some card ideas for you. And this one is a couple weeks old because the stamp set sold out as soon as the new products went live. And I was looking yesterday and they were finally back in stock. I thought, great, I can do my video. So here you go. The video you've all been asking me for, and there's also a PDF on the blog so that you can download the PDF for each of these cards, and you'll have the description and bullet points on how to make the cards, but you've also got the detailed description of all the Copics that I used as well as all the other supplies. So there we go. I think I'm finally happy with that one. And so I'm going to do the same thing with the body of this gnome, but I'm going to stop here and I am going to speed up the video a little bit because you've already seen me color the blue in a larger space. So I'm going to do the same thing with her, and her heart's going to be red, so I'm going to do that a little bit later. Okay, here we go, super fast coloring. Again, going down around the hair, and I'm going to highlight around the heart, and I turn my art piece because I find that I color better one way than I do the other. So don't be afraid to trim down your piece and move it so that it's easier to color. So now I'm coming in with a second color. This is a 13, even though I forgot to put the lid down for you, and I'm pulling that dark color out a little bit and coming out, maybe a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch. Coming back in with my 11 and doing my blending. And this is a big space to blend, so you see that it's going to take me a couple of goes at it. Otherwise, you really see the definition of the three colors if you don't blend it properly. So I'm back in with my 18, going back in and doing all my shadows around the hair and the nose and down the other side and along the bottom, building up the ink so that it starts to blend easier. I'm in with my middle color now, which is the 13, the BG 13, B as in Bob, G as in God, and pulling that out a little bit and then coming in again with the 11. And I'm pretty sure that I need to get out my re-inker for this 11 because this is getting really hard to blend. But you get the idea, right? And of course you can do your gnomes in any color you like. You know me, I just like my blues and greens. But I did add some grays and some browns, and I used red instead of pink. So I'm expanding. I'm trying hard to, embrace other colors. There we go. So you just keep blending until you're happy with it. Next, we're going to move on to the hair, and we're going to do the hair on the little girl. And again, I'm going to start with the darker color, and this is the E37. Sorry, hard for me to see. And I'm using the very, very, very smallest tip, and I'm just highlighting, going around the outside of her hair. And I turn her into a little bit of a redhead with these three colors. I'm using E31, E35, and E37. And coming down, I'm also going to do just the tips on the bottom after the tie, and I come back and do the tie in red to match the flowers and the heart a little bit later, trying to blend those colors together. And then don't forget the hair around the nose, underneath the hat. Coming back in, and I'm going to come down this side, and I'm going to keep this one in slow, but you see that I've already done the what do we want to call this? I guess it's his robe, because he's not really wearing pants. Okay, so his robe for the little boy I did in the E42, E43, and E44, and did exactly the same thing. Went around and highlighted with the darkest color, then the second color, and then pulled it all in and did 2 layers so that it blended easily. Okay, so I'm finished with that dark color. Now I'm coming in with, I think, E35, which is my second color, my medium. And I'm going to just add a little bit of that color to the bottom portion of each of her braids. I want to make sure that I've got some white showing, because that's going to cause the highlights in her hair. So you see, I'm not putting very much on here, but just a tiny, tiny little bit, and extending that dark, and not really pulling that too much either. And I'm going to use the lightest color to blend them all together, which would be the E37. So coming up, we have our light one, and you're just going to go through each of the sections and blend it in. Right now I'm filling in underneath her hat around her nose with a lighter color, and then coming down into each of the braids. And just, I'm not spending too much time on this because I don't need to blend this. It's a really, really small section, and I want the highlights to show, so I don't want it to blend it to the point that it's all one color. And you have to be careful in little spots that may happen. So again, with just the tips and down the other side of her braid with the lightest color, which is E31, sorry. I got them listed backwards on my piece of paper. And there we go, starting to take shape, don't you think? I love these colors together. The turquoise and the brown are really pretty. It also is nice with flowers. You could do the flowers in the turquoise and do the leaves in brown. That's really striking. Try a black background with that too. That'd be kind of pretty. So I'm just going back over, blending in a little bit, and there we are. And I'm just showing you the 3 colors that I used for the little Nomi guy, for his robe. Okay, moving on to the leaves, we're going to be using a YG03 and YG23, and you want to be careful here. The YG03, even though the lid looks like it's darker, it's actually the lighter of the colors, and that's what I'm just kind of showing you there. And I, again, use that scrap paper behind me or the outside edge of what I'm working on to just make sure my colors are good. Now you see in this one, I am going with the lighter color first. When I do that, it's because I want the darker color to sit on top, and I'm not going to do very much blending. And when you get into little tiny spots like this, I find this is an easy way to add a couple of colors without a whole bunch of work, because nobody's going to see the blending on this small of a spot. So I put the light in first, and then I let it sit, and as you can see, I'm going to the little girl, and then I'm going to change to the darker green, and I'm going to go back, and I'm just going to add a little dot at the bottom of each of the leaves, and that's going to sit on top and not really blend in, but it's just going to add a little bit of highlight. So that's kind of my cheap trick today for how to do little tiny leaves but get a couple of colors in there at the same time. They're starting to come together, aren't they? I could sit and color for hours. It's just so much fun. So there's the leaves. Now it's on to the grays. You've also already seen me color a hat, so I'm going to speed this one up. I'm using N3, N1, N0, and I'm going to use N5 on the second go round to add some shadows. I don't use it in the first one because I don't want to make this hat too dark, and I don't want to pull it out. So that was my N3. Now I'm going in with my N1, and I'm doing my second layer, going over top of the darkest one and pulling it out a little bit, and then going around the flowers and the leaves to add a little bit of shadow in there. And then here's my blender with the N0. So going from the outside in and pulling as much of that color as I can to help blend it. Don't I color fast? I wish. I'm a very slow, methodical colorer. So this is where I'm going in with my N5 shadows. And I'm going around the flowers a little bit, and then around the edge of her hat, over her nose, and then down the sides. Again, make sure you stay just a hair on the inside of that outline. And now I'm going to come back and I'm going to do all three of the colors again. So here's my N3. That was previously my darkest color. And you'll see the ink's moving a lot easier now because we've got one layer down. So it has warmed up the paper for us, or liquidated it, so to speak. And we can keep it active by working in small sections. If you work in a big section and you're trying to do this, you'll find that it will dry out on you. So I like to do little pieces at a time. If I'm working on a big flower, I do one petal at a time. So coming back in with my N0 and blending it out. And there we go. So I used a tiny little bit on the boy gnome too, and what I did was I just took that N0 and I wanted his beard to stay mostly white, but you can add a tiny little bit of highlight just by taking that light gray and adding some shadows, and then use the flicking technique to add a little bit of texture to his beard, just so that it's not flat white, because you've gone through all of this great detail of shadowing out everything else, and then his flat white beard will look kind of funny. You can get crazy and do all three colors and do the flicking technique and have him have a much darker beard. I decided that I wanted it white because I wanted that little bird to really show up. And so right now I'm going back in with my BGs because I forgot to do his glove, and I'm doing it the same color as his hat. So I'm back in with my BG 18, 13, and 11, and just a tiny little bit of shadow, and then I'm going to blend it out with the 11. And I think because this is again a small area, I only did one layer. And it blends quite nicely because it's such a small area, the ink is still wet. So it hasn't really settled into the paper yet. There we go. Now we're on to our reds. For the reds, I am using R32, R35, and R37. Starting again with R37, the darkest, I'm adding some highlights to the flowers and to that heart that is on her robe. And I'll be doing the little bird in a minute. I'm going to finish this one first, even though these are really small. I like to do one at a time. So the R35 is my middle red, and I'm coming in and adding a little bit more highlights, but a little bit more fill, and trying to go over top of the dark just a little bit. And I don't get too worried with the flowers because we're going to be blending the colors anyway. And then I go to her hair ties, and I'm putting the darker on the outside edge of both of them. And then I'll fill that in the center with the lightest, which I am playing with now. And that is the R32, which kind of looks pink, but it does blend very nicely with these two reds. So again, you're just going around and you're going to fill in the flowers. And they're not blending very well, so I will be going back over that again. I'm just going to finish putting down the first layer. Back into my little heart. And then down to her hair ties for that little middle section there. And I go back and forth over the dark color too and blend that in just a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to leave that for a second. I'm going to run over and do the birdie. And so again, I'm starting with the dark red, and I'm going to add the shadows for the bird. So underneath his wing, and then part of his tummy, and then the bottom tip of his wing, and just the tip of his tail, which is kind of tucked underneath the wing of the bird. And then back with the medium, which is the R35, and adding a little bit more of the color and pulling out the dark a little bit. And don't get too crazy with that because it's a pretty small bird. And then coming back in with the lightest color, which is the 32, the one that looks like pink, and filling in those areas. I left his head white, and then I pulled that lighter color up over his breast as well. But I wanted the white to kind of contrast him out a little bit so that you could really see his eyeball. Okay, so back over to my flowers, and I'm adding my dark again. And this hasn't been long enough for it to dry, but I wouldn't leave it too much longer than this. Okay, there's my darkest color, coming back in with the R35, the medium, to add a little highlight and blend that darker color in a little bit. and a little heart. And there we go. And finally with the lightest, and blending them all together. So I fussy cut these guys out. There are dies that go with them. Unfortunately, they're still on back order if you happen to be ordering the supplies today. Let's move on to the cards. We've got 2 top folding card bases, 5.5 by 8.5, scored and folded at 4 1/4. And then we have 2 mats. They're Simon Says Fog. They're 3 3/4 by 5. And what I'm working on right now is a white cardstock. It is 3.5 by 4 3/4. And I'm using the Peacock Feathers Distressed Oxides to add a little bit of color. That it's upside down. It's going to be down the left side of the card. And for the little boy, for his card, you can kind of fill it in because you're just going to be leaving one spot for the black sentiment over to the right of him. For the little girl, you want to leave a little bit more of a white space because we stamped that thanks 5 times down the side, and I did that in the same color, so if it's too dark, then you're going to lose sight of it. So I'm using the little solid image heart from the stamp set, and I'm doing the stamping off technique, which is what we used to call it in the old days. If you're new to stamping, it is now called the first generation stamping. So you're stamping and then don't re-ink and stamp again so that you get a lighter image, and it makes it appear that there's a little bit of dimension in your card because maybe one's a little bit farther away. That's why it's a little shaded out. And then just kind of work around where you're going to be stamping your sentiments. So I'm popping this back into my MISTI, and you may see that I've already stamped this, but I want to show you how I did this. I grabbed my stamp with the lid, okay, and then stamped the image, or inked it up, and then stamped it back on the cardstock. And you'll see that I popped my gnome in there. I didn't adhere them, I just put them in there dry to give me the spacing for my sentiment. And again, I'm using my little green mat from Picket Fence. I love that stamp scrubby. Okay, so this one is the little girls, and you'll see that I have put this one a little bit higher, and I'm using the grid paper that you can get for your MISTI, and I'm going 1.5 spaces to move it up each time. That way I can continually stamp it down without having to move my stamp and know that it's going to be in exactly the same spot. And I'm using the stamping off technique for this as well, or the first generation, where I'm only re-inking every second time so that every second thank you is lighter. So it's a little bit shaded. Sorry for the head. I'm trying to line that up. Okay, and then for the last one, I'm going to clean this off, and I am going to move the stamp because I'm going to type it or stamp it in red, and I didn't leave myself enough room to make the 1.5 change. So if you're doing this, move your card down to the middle and start there, and then you won't have to reposition like I did. Anyway, it works out fine. I do manage to get it on there all right. You can use the grids that are etched into the lid of the MISTI to make sure that you're lined up properly. And I wasn't, so I took it off and did it again. You want to make sure that you get it right, because that last one, you know, if it's kind of off center a little bit, it's really going to show. And this time I'm coming in with the red, and that is Festive Berries, also Distressed Oxide ink. Love that stuff. And if you get any outside, make sure you wipe it off so that you don't transfer it onto your card base. And then just give that a little rub. And so that I wanted that little spot of red because I wanted it to pull on the red that is in her flowers and on her little heart. So that's why I decided to add that color. So a little bit of foam squares on the back, and I'm just going to grab my tape runner and add my mat, and then attach that to my card base. And I do that to both of them. And you'll see that I got a little bit too much ink on that one, so I flipped it over and did the other one. And I ran out of my adhesive, so that's how easy it is to change. There's your quick lesson on how to change a tape roller. Added some more adhesive to the back, and there's my second card base done. So then all you have to do is take the protective covers off the back of the foam and add your little gnomies. These are two really cute cards, and the sentiments are very nice in this kit as well. So there you go. There's the two finished cards. So as I said before, I do have PDF files over on the blog, and there's a list of supplies. I have linked it underneath this video. There's also a link to my blog if you would like to go and see it over there and download the PDFs while you're over there. And there's a list of supplies with links to Simon Says Stamp, which is where this stamp is from, and along with all the other supplies that I used to make the cards today. Thanks so much for stopping in, and if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. Until next time, toodles!